Indeed, and joining us via Skype from Benin to deepen the conversation on the scourge of corruption that has become so pervasive in Africa, especially in Nigeria, is David Ugolor, Executive Director, African Network for Environment and Economic Justice. Well, thanks for joining us on the News at 10.
Thank you very much.
Right. Now, there is hardly any facet of the Nigerian society that is not tainted by corruption, and that is why for the onset this was one of the present administration's agenda. So why is corruption ravaging the Nigerian system?
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Again, corruption is not just peculiar to Nigeria. All over the world, there's corruption issues, and the only difference is that as corruption has been identified as a big problem and a challenge to development around the world, the international community has its priority in tackling the problem. We have seen a number of initiatives at the G7 government level, at the World Bank and IMF annual meeting, spring meeting, at the United Nations. As a matter of fact, next year, the UN General Assembly is holding a special section on corruption. That again reflects the importance attached to the challenge of corruption at the international level. And back home, if you recall, one of the key reasons why President Buhari was elected as president in Nigeria was the belief and conception that average Nigerians, when they were voting for him the first time, was that Buhari represent an opportunity to tackle the challenge of corruption in Nigeria. And obviously, the success so far recorded also reflects that commitment. However, there have been challenges in the country, particularly about the anti-corruption agency. Just recently, you saw what has happened with leadership of the EFCC. That, for example, sent a wrong signal to the international community. But the challenge is that we want to see that government is prepared, have the political will to prioritize the tackling of corruptions, and the benefit flows to Nigeria. And Nigeria has actually benefited from this internationally. This is the second time now Nigeria again record victory. Just the Abacha 3, we have seen that over $311 million have been returned back to Nigeria by the US and Jersey government. And we are in the process of now almost completing the disbursement of the Abacha 2, where over $322.5 million was returned back to Nigeria. Over 1 million poor Nigerians are currently receiving disbursement through the conditional cash transfer program to across the country. This is huge. This is a huge step. It has never happened in Africa. Nigeria was the first country in the continent that have ever used recovered assets to benefit the common people on the street. On the Abacha 3, which $311 million have come back to Nigeria, they're using it for 3 legacy projects. One, the Abuja-Kano Road, and we have the Ibadan-Lagos Road. So corruption is a big challenge, but tackling it has also got a benefit for Nigeria.
Hear me, Barrister Ugolor, if you can hear me, no doubt, really, corruption in Nigeria is endemic and, of course, systemic. But then, how can we begin to see government, key players, and, of course, Nigerians address this deep-rooted social menace?
Yes, and the first thing, and I think that's what has happened with EFCC so far. You need, in tackling systemic corruption, you need to put institutions in place. And one of those institutions that we do expect that the president will use to tackle corruption, even at the ground level, is the issue of the framework. And that's why we are appealing to the president that the problem we are having with the anti-corruption agency in the country cannot be tackled by just the appointment of individual, because individual cannot make a change. What you need is tackling the corruption problem through systemic institutional process by putting in place the legal framework that will strengthen the anti-corruption agency. And one of those institutional framework, it is when the executive submitted the proceed of crime bill to the National Assembly. But unfortunately, some forces worked against it, and the proceed of passed in. Now that there is challenge in the EFCC, there is challenge in the anti-corruption fight in the country, it is my understanding that the president will use this opportunity again, to represent the proceeds of crime bill at the National Assembly, so that at least the gaps that we are seeing today, the lack of coordination among the anti-corruption agency we are seeing in the country today, which is responsible for the reason why we are not recording the success we expect, will be addressed. So my candid opinion is that there is a challenge, there is a weakness in the institutional framework of tackling corruption in Nigeria. And the only way the president can address this is for the president to take the responsibility by representing the proceeds of crime bill to the National Assembly, so that the National Assembly can pass it into address the issue of asset recovery. And once we have an agency that manages the asset recovery from those who stole public money, then we'll begin to address the systemic problem that you have identified. Except the government have another alternative way to deal with this challenge. But I can assure you that recommendation from the UN, recommendation from the international community, and then Nigerian government signing on to the Global Forum on Asset Recovery principle, particularly on the areas of having the cooperation of the international community, government need to put in place legal framework. And that is currently absent in Nigeria. And I think President Buhari should rise up to the challenge by addressing this problem.
Now, from the president's letter to the African Union, it suggests that moving beyond the rhetorics. So, in your own opinion, what can the union do to operationalize its position on asset recovery by all member states?
Well, thank you very much. I think the issue of asset recovery is a very topical issue for Nigeria. And Nigeria has recorded a huge success. First, again, I must congratulate President Buhari. He's done very well by, again, putting all his political weight behind the call for asset recovery into African continent. Again, I want to commend him for the leadership he has provided. Now, as we are preparing for the UN General Assembly Special Section for corruption next year, what can Africans do? First, the first thing they need to do is to, again, look into their internal system. Why we'll expect the international community to continue to support African government to put in place an asset recovery regime that is meets the global best standard. First, government within their country should look into their internal system. They should put a legislative framework that will help other countries to cooperate with them. Because one of the global architecture framework for addressing the issue of asset recovery is the United Nations Conference Against Corruption, Chapter 5. And Chapter 5 deals with the issue of asset recovery. Under the Chapter 5 chapter, there are provisions on issue of cooperations with other jurisdictions. For the Nigerian government and other African government to expect any cooperation for the other country, particularly countries where monies are deposited, they need to put in place a framework, and that framework will help those other jurisdictions to cooperate with them. For example, in the case of Nigeria, there are mutual legal assistance that Nigerian government have entered into. And if Nigerian government is to benefit from the cooperation of countries where our monies are deposited, stolen and deposited, like Switzerland, like Jersey, like America, then government need to put in place the right framework so that when those countries look for cooperation, those framework can easily cooperate with them. And I think that is the best way to move forward. And once African governments are able to put in place the legal framework and the necessary provisions that back up their commitment to the UNCAC framework, then it will send the right signal to the international community. Then another challenge of it is that when the asset is eventually returned back to the country, what do they use the money to do? There should be transparency around disclosure of what the money is used for. And if you look at controversy in EFCC today, that controversy do not send the right signal to the international community for any cooperation. For instance, Nigerians do not have a transparent and accountable asset recovery database. That is very, very, very poor. You need to demonstrate to the international community, because there are two different political divide on the fight against corruption internationally. There are those who have the belief that the resources doesn't need to be returned back because the African countries are very corrupt. And there are those who believe the political ideology that let's return the money to the poor countries because they will use the money to do a lot of things. For example, in the case of Nigeria, I mentioned the Abacha earlier on, where we now use the resources to finance the conditional cash transfer across the country. So countries in Africa must demonstrate that they will be able to use the money judiciously.
some are of the opinion that, this actually brings, credence, like having to, Ibrahim Magu being, tried now, actually give credence to the president's anti-corruption drive and his commitment to actually bring out the best and to show that no one is above the law.
Again, first, I must thank the president for rising up to the challenge in the crisis currently engulfing the EFCC. But however, I'd like to also bring to the attention of the president. Like I mentioned earlier on, the president was elected on the basis of his commitment to tackle and fight corruption. And when the president assured Nigeria during his campaign that he was going to fight corruption, it doesn't necessarily mean that the president has to jump from one state to another state fighting corruption. What it means is that he was going to put priority in terms of policy, in terms of legislative framework, in terms of putting the right people in place so that corruption can be fight in different multi-dimensional way. And one of those is about the institutions.
I want to thank you for being with us on the program this morning. The News at 10 really appreciate you for being with us. It's been a wonderful experience talking with you. I'm sure this is a discussion that will still continue immediately after this news, because a lot of fora will still want to take it up. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much, sir.